So chances are if you have an old BMW or a Mercedes, you're already familiar with this thing. Bosch Monovalve. Rarely now, after 30 years or so, do they work properly. There's kind of some confusion about the operation of them. So I thought I'd make a video. There's a lot of people on forums kind of guessing how these things actually work. Actually pretty beautiful in terms of simplicity. There's also some critical design elements in here too that allow it to work properly. As you know, you can either buy the cheap MTC rebuild kit for like 15 bucks, or you can get the OEM Bosch one for like 300. So this was an MTC one that I bought. It is actually had to get another one because this one's defective out of the box. They put a bunch of glue here to seat the rubber on the cap. Camera sucks. You can kind of see it. But anyway, so you can see the diaphragm has a pinch in it. And that's going to fail prematurely. So I went ahead and got a new one. But you can see here, here's the core plunger assembly. You know, you have the screen. There's normally a spacer and a seat circlip on here, but I have it off so I can show you how it is put together. You can see there's a little hole right there. That's why the screen is there. The screen makes sure no contaminants get in this hole. On this one, you can see I picked it off, but that hole was actually plugged completely shut. So what that would do is at high speeds, the heat would cut out because the plunger would get sucked into the seating position and no water would flow through the heater core. So a lot of people complain about the issues with the MTC. I mean, obviously it's a cheap unit, so there's going to be some issues. In reality, a lot of times you really just need the diaphragm and the seal, because if the diaphragm tears, people complain of losing heat. There's 3 issues that I've found. One of them is the lip here. I've cut it in half, you can see here. There's this lip that adds about 2 millimeters to the surface. Actually, I think this is a compound issue of all 3. So you have this issue, because here's one from an original failed one. This is OEM from the factory. You can see it doesn't have that little top hat on it. This is another failed MTC one that's probably about 4 years old, but you can see it has this little hat here. The issue is the hat, and then the spring here in the MTC one is looser than the Bosch OEM one here. They weigh the same, the weight's the same. It's just the spring's stiffer. I mean, this isn't really an accurate test, but what I do is I kind of put my finger here, give it a good shake. You can hear how much this one moves. Do the same thing with this one. You know, it rattles a lot less. And when you do it to the MTC one, you can actually feel this plunger coming out and hitting your finger. So what I usually do is I'll get an MTC, disregard this, take the diaphragm, cut it, and then put it on a good used Bosch core. So as long as this moves freely, you can reuse this part of the original one. If it's failed, like this one here, this is original Bosch one, but you can see it's seized. I've tried everything. This one's not repairable. So let's say this was you with this one, you'd have to use the MTC one, but you can make a few little modifications that would get it to work good enough and not have it close up on you when you're driving and having a loss of heat. Here's what I found is the differences here. So not only is there a weaker spring on the MTC unit, the mounting depth here, so this flat surface here is actually at the monovalve, like where it goes into the valve. And so this height is greater by about 2 millimeters. Well, and if you're counting the seal too, about 4 millimeters taller than the OEM valve. So what that's going to do is when water's flowing past it, coupled with the weaker spring at higher flow rates, it's just going to force that valve shut. So what you can do to alleviate some of the problems, you cut off the this little piece here, make it flat. Okay, that's going to divert, or at least keep some of the water from snagging this plunger here. And then if you can use the OEM one, that's why it's the best, because it puts it at the factory depth. But being recessed there, you can't really do much. What I've done before, I don't know how great it works, but just take a Dremel with a flat grinding tip, and you can take, you know, good enough millimeter or so out of here. Just use a mic and you can confirm that. The problem is then the spring's a little bit weaker because you moved the plunger back, but sometimes you can put some shims here between the spacers, bring it back up, and you'll be good to go. The major thing that I noticed after kind of trial and error and studying these things is, why do they shut at high flow rates, especially the MTC one? I started noticing on the OEM one, if you look here, so the center, that's that brass tip. The washer's the outside, but the OEM one, my camera's garbage. You can kind of see there, that brownish one, it has three little teats that ride on the shaft, and you can't see it in this picture, but there's actually a piece of rust stuck in here, so that shows you that water does flow through there considerably. And that's why the screen's there, because, you know, screen should in theory be here. There's the hole at the bottom like we were talking about, and then this through hole, that's where the bronze tip goes through. And then it's vented through this washer here. So when it's, you know, when it's de-energized, the plunger's all the way down, water's flowing past it, you're actually pulling this little hole here. You know, there's a diaphragm across, so you're pulling coolant through here from the suction side. Little bits of coolant is filling up this chamber. The result of this flow is a vacuum in this tube here. So that's going to keep this thing pulled shut at high flow so it doesn't sink in and cut off your heat flow. So if that tube is plugged, or this is plugged, or you're not getting enough flow through the end here, this thing's just going to suck shut. Because I was experimenting with the MTC one, and you can see that's what was happening. You know, you have the inner shaft, this just perfectly circular washer, instead of this toothed washer. And so you have very, and it kind of just, you know, wobbles on the shaft, and it's flat, so when the circlip's on there, you have hardly any room for that water to flow. And if you have hardly any room for that water to flow, you're not going to get a vacuum in this chamber, so at low speeds you'll have heat. At high speeds you will not have heat because the plunger is getting sucked closed. If you have a really small Dremel and like a pair of tweezers and some patience, you can grind really fine reliefs, like a chamfer at the top and bottom, and then through the center little channel to help promote water flow through this washer. Because if you take an MTC and you grind it down a little bit, cut the hat off, modify the washer, it'll work just basically as good as OEM. I'm pretty picky, so I like to use the Bosch unit. It's a nice stout spring. Just use the MTC thing, cut the head off, or the little hat off. And I like to try and reuse the original washer as long as possible, because you can just see it just has so much better flow characteristics than that MTC one. I mean, you can modify the MTC one to work. It's a finicky, like, watchmaker's type operation to get that plastic machine down properly. Yeah, really, I mean, the only other option is to spend the $300 and get the Bosch one. which is you're just going to get new plastic with this identical piece. And, you know, if you keep the washer and you have a good core and you have good coolant, you know, these MTC ones will last 3 or 4 years, but then you just buy another $10 one, cut the diaphragm, throw it into service, and then you're good. You know, you don't have to try and scratch your head and take the monovalve apart a million times, like I have, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, because, you know, there's not really a lot of info on how these things actually work. I mean, they're pretty simple when you think, oh, it's just a plunger, blah, blah, blah. But these depths, tension of the spring, the flow, like this is a really finely engineered, super simple piece of equipment. You really got to give it to these old German guys from back in the day. I mean, they really just knew how to make stuff work. I mean, to think that, you know, the difference between such small differences will cause, you know, this piece to not work properly and frustrate the living hell out of you. You know, and you're like, well, it's just a plunger. Can't be that difficult. But, I mean, that's the beauty in engineering, honestly. You know, little things, really understanding how the physical world works, you know, helps fixing these cars like this. Because, man, I sat down and I was like, I'm not going to give up until I figure this damn thing out. Because I've dealt with monovalve issues for years. And the Bosch units didn't used to be expensive, but now they're so expensive, it's ridiculous to buy an OEM one. And when you can make the aftermarket ones work, because for $14, a little extra work it's fun. It's part of the game. If you have an old Mercedes or Beamer, I mean, you're working on it enough anyway, so what's 45 minutes going to hurt you?